It's time to turn to the WUKY Sports Page with your host, Keith Elkins, revealing conversations and stories you thought you knew from prominent Kentucky sports figures. Now, here once again is Keith Elkins.
Kenny Walker is with us today. He was an All-American at the University of Kentucky, the second leading all-time scorer in men's basketball with 2,080 points. He was a member of the charter class of the UK Athletics Hall of Fame. He was the fifth pick in the 1986 NBA draft by the New York Knicks and played in the NBA for the Knicks and the Washington Bullets, and also played in Spain, Italy, and Japan. So a great background and career in basketball and really one of the all-time greats for UK. Kenny, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. Quite a introduction when I hear you say those things about, my career for a kid that came from Roberta, Georgia. Population of my hometown, maybe 2,500 people, 2 stoplights in the whole town. To think that I was able to come from that small area in Georgia and come to Kentucky and have the career and travel the world playing basketball, it's been a great ride.
I was going to ask you about Roberta, so let me just get to that now since you brought it up. You mentioned coming from a small town in Georgia. You had achieved basketball fame before you left Roberta as a McDonald's All-American. It sounded like really that if you were playing nowadays, you would have been a candidate to leave Roberta and go to one of the academies that are all over the country now. But you played high school ball in Roberta. Tell me about coming from that small town and getting to Lexington and being part of this big-time program, meeting some other players. I guess, of course, you'd played in some all-star games against them. But, yeah, that was quite a step up, wasn't it?
No question. I wouldn't change anything about it. I had great parents. I had great teachers in high school when they knew that I was going to get a scholarship in basketball to go play Division I basketball. I had a good 3 older brothers in a community that kind of surrounded me in that little small town. Anything that I did to get out of line, boom, it got right back, to my parents. So even though it was small, it was great to have that type of support. But even with that type of support, when you come to the University of Kentucky, the high expectations, the tradition of the program, Georgia's a football state. And the main reason that I came to Kentucky is because of the fans, the history, the tradition, playing on the big stage. Even with all of that and having the career that I had at UK, being the number 5 overall pick in the NBA draft, to see that transition and the things that my family was able to experience along the way, especially my mom and dad, from my high school career, college, and my early part of my NBA career. I don't think that you could write a Hollywood movie to kind of experience the emotional roller coaster that you're on. You're going to these great cities. You're traveling all over the world. And a little kid from Roberta, Georgia, I'm proud of that.
Tell me about your first developing interest in basketball. I would assume you and your brothers were playing some kind of sport just about all the time, if I could make a guess on that. But how did you get interested in basketball, and then when did you really start to focus on basketball?
Funny thing about the little town that I grew up in, it was so small that when I got 3 older brothers that are 4, 8, and 9 years older than I am. Basketball was always the big thing in our little community or little town, even though it's a football state. I always tell people if I had played football, probably could have been a pretty good football player. No doubt I go to the University of Georgia, no question. But because I was a basketball player and growing up, a lot of tough, hard lessons in the backyard going against your 3 older brothers. They're not taking it easy on you. They roughing you up a little bit. There was times that I would go home crying, trying to compete with those guys at a young age. But they will always tell my mom, because my mom was like, "Don't hurt my baby," and roughing him around. But they were always like, if he's going to play sports, and particularly basketball, because football wasn't around, he's going to have to get knocked down and learn how to get up and get back in there and fight. And it was kind of an old school way of thinking, but it really helped me out with my career, my mindset, my approach to the work ethic. Playing against older, bigger, stronger guys really helped me with my development into the player that I ultimately became. But the funny story is, my freshman year in high school, I was 6'3". In the summer between my freshman year of high school and my sophomore year, I went from 6'3" to 6'5". And the football coach came by practice one day, and I had never played football before, but he had seen me play basketball to see how I could run and jump. And he said, "Look, come and try out for the football team." We had just got a football program at our school 2 years prior to that. And he said, "I think you can really help us out." That lasted about 5 minutes. My high school coach came down and asked him, "What are you talking to him about?" and he was like, "Well, I think he can help us with the football program to get started." And he said, "Look, this kid has got potential in basketball. You're not going to talk him into, starting your football program." If he had started out young and, had techniques down, but he's a great basketball player. He's got a lot of potential. And I remember my high school basketball coach said, "Son, you're going to make it in basketball, and you're not going to make it in football." And that killed my football career.
You retired from football.
As we were just getting started. But, I appreciate all of the things that I went through, because who knows if I could have played football. Football is a physical sport. You can get hurt and injured at any time. But basketball was my calling. That's what I did. And I had people around me that had a lot of confidence in me, that if I worked hard and had the right attitude, that I could make it.
And, of course, you have to build up your own confidence, and you excelled in high school, of course. But in a small town, everybody kind of adopts the local sports star, especially when you're like a once-in-a-generation talent. So I'm sure you had a lot of attention there. But on the other hand, puts a little more pressure on you when you leave. Everybody back home is following Kenny Walker's career and seeing how he's doing at Kentucky and then later on in the NBA. Tell me about what that was like, being the star in a small town and then moving on and carrying that with you to UK.
Again, I go back, to my parents and just the humble beginnings that you come from. I appreciated it, every step up the ladder. It was a growing experience. It was a learning experience for me each and every step of the way. When I came to UK, the one and dones obviously wasn't happening at that time. And I think the thing that really sold my parents on coming to UK, of course, everybody is promising, "Hey, if you come and play for my school, I can get your kid a good education and I can get him to the NBA or whatever." Joe B. Hall, who recruited me out of Georgia with the help of Leonard Hamilton, who's the head coach of Florida State now, was his top recruiter. Leonard discovered me. Coach Hall came in and closed the deal. And I still remember this to this day. And of course, we lost Coach Hall. I guess it's been about a little over 3 years ago. I remember him saying, "Kenny, if you come to the University of Kentucky, you're going to play against the best talent in practice, the best competition in practice. We got the best facility, Rupp Arena. we got the Joby Hall Wildcat Lodge, which was the cutting edge of the things that were going on in college basketball. But he said, more importantly, we got the history and tradition of Kentucky basketball. And that goes beyond you being a great player. Even if you play in the NBA 10 or 15 years, or if you don't, if you keep your nose clean and get your degree at UK, those fans will never forget who you are. And I always remember that because for me personally, I didn't win a championship at UK. Like you said, I'm the second all-time leading scorer. I had a great career. Went to one Final Four, 2 Elite Eights, and 1 Sweet 16. We were knocking on the door every year, and we did everything but win a championship. Mm-hmm. And I feel bad for Sam Bowie, Melvin Turpin, Joby Hall, all of my other teammates because we had the talent to do it. But every year we just came up a little bit short. But the fans had 4 years of watching, knowing that these guys got a chance, and we gave them hope every single year. So that's the only thing that I can hang my hat on. I wish I could have won a championship, but I think people appreciate, the fans appreciate that still to this day. I didn't win a championship, but I don't know how many people come up to me and say, I appreciate your contribution to the program in the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, Joby Hall was exactly right about that, wasn't
Yes.
he? You've seen it these past nearly 40 years now to see the fans remember the players, not just yourself, but many others, and many of whom were not necessarily star players, but just the guys who made contributions to the team or were on the roster.
Yeah.
They're Wildcats forever, aren't they?
Well, the fans get to see us, grow and develop, not only as basketball players. Even the guys that didn't start or didn't play a whole lot, the fans knew who they were just by watching the team and keeping up with the team every year. And oftentimes I tell people, obviously I love my family, in Georgia, but when I came to Kentucky, the coaches, my teammates, they became my family for 4 years. You travel with these guys, you eat with these guys, you practice with these guys, you play games with these guys, and you hang out together, off the court in your social life. So they're family. And I really appreciate those times, Keith, because for me personally, I've lost Joby Hall, Charles Hurt, Melvin Turpin, Ed Davender, Brett Barrett, Cedric Jenkins. Those are a lot of guys that are my age,
Sure.
that I played with. And the memories that I had with those guys from my college years is great because we were together 3 or 4 years. And I wish that those guys were around to experience the things that I get to experience on a daily basis, and it's really sad that they had to leave us so early.
Mm-hmm. It was a very interesting era at UK during your time because you saw the Final Four in '84, and that was the year of the bizarre Georgetown game, the 3 for 33 in the second half. Kentucky fans of a certain age,
Good memory.
Yeah, it's one
bad memory, I should say. A nightmare.
That one kind of sticks with you, doesn't it? I'm sure it must have from a player's standpoint. But it was a great team. It was a great team that went to that Final Four, and you talked about it being long before the one and done era. When you got here, there were a lot of established veteran players that you got to, I won't say ease in, but that presence of a lot of the veteran players like Charles Hurt and Dirk Minifield and people like that, that had to help you fit into the program when you started, didn't it?
Boy, you mentioned 2 of the really good ones. I was a freshman when Dirk Minifield, Charles Hurt was a senior, along with Derek Horde. Derek was a little quiet, but Charles Hurt and Dirk Minifield, boy, they really helped me out as a freshman because the first couple of months I was a little homesick, a little lost. But from a personality and a big brother standpoint, I would say those two guys. And I got to give a shout-out to Sam Bowie, who was a part of that class originally coming in out of high school.
With Charles and Dirk.
Yeah, Dirk. He should have been a senior.
Right.
But obviously Sam had the stress fracture, and he was out my first year at UK. He came back my second year, so I think he missed about 2 years. And I often tell people who, in modern history, with the fans that follow John Calipari and Anthony Davis, when Anthony Davis played the 1 year at UK, Sam Bowie was Anthony Davis before Anthony Davis, except for Anthony is about 6'10", 6'11". Sam Bowie was 7'2", that could run and jump, and he was a game changer. He was far ahead of his time. But the 2-year layoff with the injuries at UK hurt him. Now, to his credit, he came back that year in the 1984 Final Four. A little rusty, got a little bit better as the year went on, but I don't think people really understand that if Sam Bowie had never gotten injured at UK, you're probably looking at 2-3 championships in a row with him, Melvin Turpin, myself, Winston Bennett, James Blackman, Roger Harden, Brett Barrett. We had 8 or 9 McDonald's All-American guys on the 1984 Final Four team. So if Sam had remained healthy, we would have probably won a couple of championships.
You mentioned him being ahead of his time. He also, for that time, something was almost unheard of, could step outside and shoot. Now, you wouldn't ask a guy to do that so much in those days because we didn't have the three-point shot yet. But as he'd been playing now, he'd be the kind of 7-footer who'd be running the floor and stopping at that three-point line.
Absolutely. He was a great outside shooter. And like you said, far ahead of his time for a 7-footer because Sam was tall and slim. He was more of a European-style player before the Europeans, started to come here in the NBA with big guys that can shoot the ball from the outside. That was an underrated part of his game, but here's the most underrated part of his game that I don't think a lot of people talk about. He was a great passing big guy. His vision in terms of seeing the total court, it was almost like he was a point guard inside of a 7'2" body. And I don't think he really got enough credit for his passing skill. Of course, he was a great shot blocker, and before he got injured at UK, when Kentucky was recruiting me, they showed a video highlights of Sam Bowie's freshman year at UK. Him and Dirk Minifield came in at the same time out of high school. And the one play highlight that I remember when they were in my home showing this highlight, Dirk Minifield got a rebound, and Sam Bowie was streaking down the right side of the court. And Dirk Minifield threw a lob pass from 3/4 length of the court. When he threw the pass, I'm watching that as a high school kid, and I'm going, where is he throwing this ball, on this small TV that we're looking at it on? And all of a sudden, you see Sam Bowie streaking down the right side of the court from out of nowhere at 7'2". To run that quick and that fast to the other end of the court, lob pass, Rupp Arena exploded and all of that, and I was like, man, I want to be a part of that.
You want to be there. Want to be there for that.
Yeah.
We talked about what an interesting era it was at UK during your time because after the Final Four team in '84, then the next year you're faced with different circumstances. A lot of those guys that you mentioned are gone, and so it ended up that you had to be the absolute focal point of the offense. And tell me about how that came about during that season, because it was an 18-13 year, but at the same time, once you found that this was what you needed to do, that team began to click somewhat. And so tell me about how that decision was reached and how you handled that.
First of all, I give Joby Hall a lot of credit, for that. He was coming off that tough, emotional loss of the 1984 Final Four, losing to Georgetown in the semifinals. And he once told me that if he would have won that game, he was going to retire after that game because he had all of this talent. But because we shot 3 of 33 in the second half and played bad, he came back for one year. And you're exactly right. We were 18-12 in the regular season in the SEC tournament. We didn't think we were going to get into the NCAA tournament. And I remember 2 or 3 guys had went on spring break, headed to Florida, thinking our season was over. And me and a few guys were hanging out shooting pool in the Wildcat Lodge. We was watching the selection show for the NCAA tournament. And we got in as a 12th seed. Yeah. And I remember Coach Hall calling practice the next day. He couldn't believe that we got in. And I remember him saying this. He said, guys, there's no pressure on Kentucky. He said, I can't recall any other time that we've been in the NCAA tournament. There's no pressure. So we go into this tournament really loose. He was completely different. He was relaxed. We upset, I think, University of Washington in the first game. We were a 12 seed. They were a 5 seed. And then I think the next game we beat UNLV, and I think they were either a 5 or 6 seed. I can't remember what it was. But we made this incredible run to the Final Four, which was held in Lexington, Kentucky, in Rupp Arena. Last time the Final Four has been held in an on-campus, I guess, arena. We were hanging with St. John's in the Sweet 16 midway through the first half of the St. John's game. Chris Mullins, their great star from St. John's, inadvertently pokes me in the eye. And my left eye swelled up like I've been hit with the overhand right by Mike Tyson. So it swelled up during the game. We end up losing the game by a few points, but Joby Hall made a great run in that final game. And unfortunately, as soon as that game was over, he retired and turned the reins over to Eddie Sutton.
Mm-hmm. Now, that season leading up to that, there was a moment, wasn't there, where he decided that you had to be the focal point of the offense for this team to succeed? Because you became the focus on offense, and your point totals began to rise. But I mean, of course, you draw a lot of attention from the defense too. But they were getting the ball to you a lot.
Yeah, I meant to answer that question early. So we started that year off 1-4. Okay. Coach Hall was frustrated. We were frustrated. We had lost Sam Bowie. We had lost Melvin Turpin, a lot of the juniors and seniors, that we had on that Final Four team. And after the 1-4 start, Coach Hall calls me into his office, and he says, son, this is going to be a rough year. You don't have Bowie and Turpin anymore. And he said, you're going to have to be a guy that you're going to have to play out of position. Rob Locke and Cedric Jenkins were both freshmen, and they weren't quite ready to go. So he said that you're going to have to be our workhorse. And he literally told me, you're going to have to average 20 points and, 9 or 10 rebounds. Once he told me that, I knew he had the confidence in me. It's just a matter of just going out and trying to put the right work, the right attitude each and every night in order to get it done. And even though we didn't have a good regular season record at 18-12, I averaged 22.5 points a game and 11 rebounds. And we lost the first game of the SEC tournament to Florida, but that team went into the NCAA tournament on fire. But I always said, Coach Hall had the confidence, in me to say, hey, you're going to have to get it done. And there was a lot of nights that I got double team and triple team, and he had to be in my ear a whole lot to not get frustrated with the rough play that I was receiving sometimes. So it wouldn't be no Skywalker if Joby Hall didn't, give me an opportunity to really shine.
You and Roger Harden made quite a team in those days. Tell me about your relationship on the court working with Roger.
Man, Roger is the best. So I play in the McDonald's All-American game my senior year of high school. It's in Chicago, Illinois. Roger is from Valparaiso, Indiana. And we're on the same team. We're on the Eastern team for the McDonald's All-American 1982. Back then, you could only play in 2 All-Star games. And I played in the Georgia high school All-Star games, and then I played in the McDonald's All-American game. And I think they might have had the parade All-American game. Roger came to the McDonald's game, but he didn't play. He just watched practice because he played in the Kentucky-Indiana All-Star game, which they always played 2 games every year. That's what he was allowed to play. But he came to practice, and he watched me practice one day. And he came up to me after practice, and he said, "Man, I know you think I'm a slow white guy and I can't jump and all of that." He said, "Man, I like the way you fly around the court, man." He said, "Man, I can't wait to play with you at Kentucky." He said, "I'm going to get you to rock. I mean, we're going to be a good combination." And I'm looking at him like, come on, man. But you got to know Roger, the confidence that he had. And he and I came in together. And as freshmen, of course, back then, freshmen didn't play a lot, at least the first 15 or 20 games until you prove yourself. Roger had to go against Dirk Minifield and Dickie Bill in practice, and I had to go against Charles Hurt and Derek Hort in practice as freshmen. And we were roommates, and we would be going back to the room crying every day how tough it was and all of that. But I always admired his determination. And from his sophomore year on, Roger and I played with him longer than I played with any other player. His court sense, his savvy, he's probably the 4th or 5th all-time career leader in assists at UK. I always say this about Coach Hall, and I say the same thing about Roger. Underrated, underappreciated. I'm telling you, I saw him grow and develop in confidence and as a player each and every year. And it's just sad because our careers mirrored each other. And I wish that we could have gotten that championship for the fans, because he always say the same thing that I say. It's the fans that make the program. And you go out and you play your heart for this university and this state. And to come up short each and every year is disappointing, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
You had mentioned briefly the Joe Hall, of course, retired after that run in the 85 tournament and announced his retirement. So you had one more year to go, and now you're going to get a new coach. What are the thoughts going through your mind after you heard Coach Hall's announcement that he would not be back?
I remember when he made the announcement in Denver, Colorado. That's where we lost the Sweet 16 to St. John's. And it was taken – he always did his radio show after the game, after we got showered and everything. And when it was on the road, usually it was pretty quick, and he was in and out. It was taking a while. We sat on the bus for a while, and then one of the state troopers that was traveling with us, came to the bus because everybody was on the bus waiting on Coach Hall to finish his show. And he came in and he said, "I just want to give you guys the heads up. Coach Hall just said on the radio with Kaywood that he's stepping down as UK coach." That's when we all found out, sitting on the bus. So for me personally, I came to play for Coach Hall. And I remember being kind of numb, and I was like, okay, I'm a junior. I just come off the best year that I had at UK. I know I can go to the NBA, probably if I want to. I'm going to get my information, check that status, talk it over with my family, and just make the best decision that I possibly can. So I was back and forth with it until we named Coach Sutton the coach. And I remember the first thing that Coach Sutton did when he took the job, he called me and he said, "Son, I watched you play the last couple of years at Kentucky." He said, "I like what I see." He said, "If you will come back to Kentucky for another year, I know you the type of player and person that can lead us to a championship." He said, "You got the tools around you." He said, "Coach Hall did an outstanding job, but a lot of these guys were young and they weren't ready." And he said, "If you serious about getting your degree, I know that you're on track to get your degree and what it would mean to your mom and dad." I don't know where he got all of this information from, but he said all of the right things. So I talked to my mom, my dad, my high school coach, and we all felt like if I left UK at that time, I could have been a top 20 pick. But if I came back, I had a chance to win a national championship, had a chance to get my degree, and I think gave me another year because I was a tall, slim kid. I needed probably another year to develop a little bit more physically. That's how it was back then. Looking back on it now, maybe I should have left earlier, but I do think more mature, more ready. Almost got a championship my senior year if we didn't have to play LSU and Dale Brown for 3 times. Beat them twice in the regular season and beat them in the SEC tournament. And we met them in the Elite Eight. This is after beating Alabama for the 4th time. So I felt bad for Eddie Sutton because I know he was only here for 3 years. In the 2 years after that, there was a lot of problems and issues with him in the program. But a lot of people forget his first year at UK, 32-4. That was our record. Mm-hmm. And again, if we didn't have to play those teams so many times in the NCAA tournament, who knows? That team probably could have won a championship.
That was, as you say, Eddie Sutton's first team, and he was known as being a defensive coach and maybe deliberate on offense. But that was an exciting team to watch. What made that team so good and so exciting to the fans? I mean, obviously they won a lot of games, but what made that team so good to watch with you and Blackman and the others?
Oh, boy, you got the names, man. Blackman and Ed Davender and Roger Harden. The reason why it was special and the reason why it worked, Roger Harden, outstanding point guard. Ed Davender could play point guard or shooting guard. I mean, Brooklyn, New York. Ed was, God, Ed was so good. And James Blackman, here's the key. James Blackman at 6'4", sacrificed, well, I guess it was 3-guard offense. He could handle the ball and he could shoot outside. But James Blackman was the key because he was athletic enough to guard bigger and taller players. And Eddie Sutton, as you said, was a great defensive coach. He could teach how to get in the passing lanes and get steals. So we got a lot of transition basket. And my partner on the front line was Winston Bennett. We weren't Melvin Turpin and Sam Bowie, but Winston was as rough and tough an enforcer as it came. So he wasn't 7 feet tall, but he gave us a toughness, and we all could run and jump, and we could get in transition. That's what made that team special. And with all due respect to Coach Hall, that wasn't his style or his philosophy. But Eddie Sutton is probably, I would say this, him and Hubie Brown of the NBA are probably the 2 best defensive coaches that I think that I've ever seen.
You brought up the name of Ed Davender, a great player, and from Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. You're from Roberta, Georgia. You come into UK, and obviously you've had different backgrounds, different experiences in life, but that's part of the college experience, and I guess part of your pro experience, too. I was going to ask you later about your international experience, but you get to meet people from different parts of the country or different parts of the world. Did you get close enough to compare experiences with him?
Man, I smile because you say that because when Ed came in as a freshman, I was in my junior year. And I remember when he got on campus, Leonard Hamilton, who recruited most of us out of high school at that time, he came to me and he said, Kenny, I want you to room with Ed. And, he's coming from out of New York and, you're in your junior year. I want you to help him out and, show him the ropes and everything. And and I said to Coach Hamilton, I'm going to show a guy from Brooklyn, New York, even though I'm, older and I'm from Roberta, Georgia. What can I do? And I remember Coach Ham just smiled and said, Kenny, you can be a big brother, just, help him out and all of that. And Coach Ham was really good at doing little stuff like that. Ed and I would almost seem like the odd couple, from where I grew up, small rural area, and him in Brooklyn, New York. But what I like about, Ed, he was one of the most humble, down-to-earth guys. You think of these guys from New York, big personalities, big, attitude. And he would show that whenever he needed to. But what he really impressed me about, you hear all of this stuff about guys from New York, their work ethic and their attitude and all of that. Ed worked harder than anybody. And I was proud of him because when he first came in, he really looked up to me, which I thought it was kind of surprising in a lot of ways, considering our backgrounds. But I was amazed with his ability to listen, absorb information, not just the basketball, part of it. Culturally, coming from Brooklyn, New York to Lexington, Kentucky, that was a cultural shock, for him. Mm-hmm. So for me, trying to get him around not only the right teammates, which we were all really cool, but the students on campus and places that he could go and be comfortable and have a good time. I really like that because I think he transitioned, from that New York lifestyle and mentality. He loved Kentucky. After his career was over at UK, he lived here in Kentucky, passed away here in Kentucky. So that really tells you a lot about how he felt about the program in the state.
And ironically, you ended up in New York the next year as a Knick. That's after being the fifth pick in the draft after you concluded your college career. This is some pretty heady stuff. You've had the great college career now. I mean, you know that you're going to go pretty high in the draft, I guess, and then you end up being the number 5 pick. What was it like for you during that period of time leading up to and including the draft?
Well, I'll go back again to when Coach Sutton took over as coach. I was being projected to be a top 20 pick, but my parents, my high school coach, and my older brothers, they felt like if I came back to UK for my senior year, that I had an opportunity to be a top 10 pick, which I was. Number 5 overall with the New York Knicks and everything. Great draft. The number 1 pick in the draft that year, Brad Daugherty out of North Carolina. Number 2 pick out of Maryland, Lynn Bias, who unfortunately passed away a few days after that. Number 3 pick, Chris Washburn from out of North Carolina State. Mm-hmm. Number 4 pick, Chuck Person, Charles Barkley teammate at the University of Auburn, which I played against in the SEC. And then me, Number 5 was obviously really high. I did the right thing by coming back because I got my degree. Almost won a championship, and now I'm living the dream of the NBA. Thought I was mature and ready to deal with New York and everything. But those first 2 years, because we didn't have a lot of talent and it was a lot of losing, was frustrating, especially after you won so much at UK. So from a mental standpoint of view, those first 2 years, despite the money and the lifestyle, was really tough. But going into that third and fourth year in the NBA was exciting because we got better as a team. got close to a couple of championships, never won it, but we went deep into the playoffs. I won the NBA Slam Dunk contest in 1989 and won the New York City's fan base heart, I think, at that time. I think my career was up and down the first couple of years, but I think that solidified my place as being a true New York Knick.
And that slam dunk championship was something that the UK fans really latched onto too, as they continued to follow your career. That was quite the highlight. I mean, that's not NBA competition in the sense of winning ball games, but at the same time, there's attention focused on that. And if you're out there, you want to do your best and win the thing.
Well, the fans that supported me, my whole career at UK was just awesome. A lot of people ask me a lot of times, how did you get the name Skywalker? And a lot of younger kids that didn't watch me play, they think that I'm named after Skywalker from the Star Wars movie. But Skywalker was kind of born really my freshman year at UK. Sam Bowie he's on crutches after fracturing his tibia, and he wasn't playing. And it was my freshman year. So very first Midnight Madness, that at that time it was at 12:01 midnight because NCAA had that rule where you couldn't start until midnight of October the 15th. So we were getting early start. I think Coach Hall was the second school to do that. So Sam was setting out. We was warming up for the Big Blue Madness, doing some layup. And warming up, stretching out, doing some layup, and finally somebody said, do some dunks, to get the crowd going. I think Dirk Minifield, Charles Hurt, they went down and did a few dunks and everything. Nobody had never seen me dunk. They probably seen me dunk, like in a game, but not in a format where, you can just do whatever you want to do.
A little more freelancing.
It freelancing. Yeah. That's exactly what it was. So I remember the first time that I did a dunk, I did like a 360 dunk, and the crowd just went wow. And every time that I did a dunk after that, they just kept getting louder and louder and louder. For me, I could always jump, and I was always a good athlete, but with that adrenaline and the crowd going wild, there was 11,000 people there in Memorial Coliseum. I had just played in the McDonald's All-American game at the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago, Illinois, 2 months prior to that, and we had about 9,000 people at that game. So at the Midnight Madness, this is the most people that I played in front of, and I just remember the adrenaline and everything was great. So when it was over, I was talking to a couple of reporters, and they was asking me, they was like, man, what do you think about that reception of the fans gave you with the dunks? And I was like, man, that's just kind of routine for me. Mm-hmm. And Sam Bowie I think he was talking to Coach Leonard Hamilton in the background. He told Coach Hamilton, he said, the only other somebody I seen dunk like that is Dominique Wilkins, who just so happened to play at the University of Georgia.
Right.
That was kind of my mentor, growing up in Georgia, going to the Georgia camps. Our styles are pretty much the same, but I always looked at it as a compliment. He said, man, he's like Dominique Wilkins, and I think Sam said, like, he's like a Skywalker. And I think one of the reporters heard that, and, Skywalker.
There it is. And you were able to embrace that right away, I guess, right?
Well, trying to live up, to that name, every night, people are not paying their money to watch you sit around and look. They want to see you play and play above the rim. So early on, that's the way that I played. It was exciting, style of basketball. Of course, you have a lot of guys play above the rim now, but I think in a lot of ways, guys like myself, Charles Barkley, Michael Jordan, Clyde Drexler, guys who made a name for themselves in college before they went to the NBA. I'm happy that I was able to display that for 3 or 4 years so fans can enjoy and appreciate that.
Tell me about the coaches in the NBA, your relationships with the coaches that you had, because you step into the NBA, now it's your job. Now it's business, and I would think that changes a lot of things about a relationship with a coach. But tell me how that worked in most cases.
Well, the NBA is a little tough because it's more of a business. It's important to have a good relationship with your coach, especially if you're the superstar player. If you're going to be successful in the NBA, it's all about relationship and understanding that you're dealing with men as opposed to, young men. And I'll just use Rick Pitino as an example, who I played for my second and third year in the NBA with the New York Knicks before he came to Kentucky. When Pitino took over the team, we were really bad. I think we had only won 22 games before. In his first year, he won 34 games in his first year with the Knicks, but that was enough to get us in the playoffs. And then in his second year, we won 52 games and dethroned the Boston Celtics in the Atlantic Conference. And Pitino was on his way to a lot of success with the New York Knicks. But that's when Kentucky was getting in trouble with Eddie Sutton the last couple of years, 88, 89. He ended up leaving. Kentucky's hit with a couple of years of probation, and the Kentucky job came open. And before Pitino took the job, Kentucky had contacted him. And I remember him calling me in his office one day after practice and going, "Look, man, I know I can trust you in saying this." And he said, "I've been approached by Kentucky about their head coaching job." He said, "But we're in the playoffs. We got a lot of stuff going on." And he was like, "Just tell me about the culture, the program, and all of that stuff." Being that they were going to go on probation, I didn't think that it would be something that he would be interested, in. But as the playoffs went on, we eventually got eliminated by the Chicago Bulls in the second round of the playoffs. I'm in his office again, talking about Kentucky, my thoughts if he should do it or not. I always appreciate, and I'm not taking any credit for him taking the job. The only thing that I told him, even though you're coaching the New York Knicks, you're coaching Patrick Ewing, Mark Jackson, Charles Oakley, you're coaching men that make a lot of money, and you got to talk and deal with those guys a little bit differently than the college guys. And I think he was a little frustrated because he was the coach, and I think at times the pro guys tuned him out. And I think he was intrigued about going back to a situation where he had a little bit more control. Ultimately, he did leave UK after left the NBA and the Knicks after we got eliminated by the Chicago Bulls in the, I think in 1990, I guess in 90 and 91, somewhere along in there.
Yeah,
89.
89, 90 was his first season.
That's the year that I won the dunk contest. Mm-hmm. So he left that spring afterwards. And I've often said this about Pitino when he took the Kentucky job. Nobody gave him a chance in the first couple of years. Thank goodness Richie Farmer, Pelfrey, Feldhouse, and Sean Woods, the unforgettables. Mm-hmm. They the only guys that stayed around. Everybody transferred school. Rex went to the NBA. LaRon Ellis went to Syracuse. Chris Mills went to Arizona. Yeah. Sean Kemp went to junior college. The team that Eddie Sutton was going to have was a championship team. And now you're on probation, and it's not looking good. That first year, they were only projected to win 5 games, but they went 14-14. They were respectable. Then within 2 years after that, with the help of recruiting Jamal Mashburn to get him to come to UK. They were one Christian Laettner shot away, 1992, from advancing to the Final Four, maybe winning the championship. Now, for me, this is what I would say about Pitino. This is what I think separates him and a guy like John Calipari. Pitino was a great recruiter because he kept guys around for 3 or 4 years and he could develop them. Calipari is a better recruiter, but Rick Pitino is a much better motivator and coach. He can take lesser talent and lift these guys up and get them to overachieve, which leads me into Mark Pope. I don't think anybody else could have gotten Rick Pitino to come back to UK for the. I mean, everything just kind of lined up perfectly. Mark Pope is kind of somewhat of an extension of Rick Pitino. He is not gonna get 4 or 5 McDonald's All-Americans, I think, every year, but I do think he's capable of getting one or two McDonald's All-American every year. And if he does that, like Pitino, if he can somehow, in this name, image, and likeness and transfer portal, if he can keep guys around for 2 or 3 years, which I think that's the plan, experience, guys that have gone through the tournament a couple of times, that's where I think Kentucky's been missed. Calipari was a great recruiter, but you don't know what those freshmen will do when you get in those clutch, pressurized situations. And I think Mark will build his team to try to win championships and try to advance farther in the NCAA tournament.
Well, just a couple of more questions, Kenny, but I was going to go back to your NBA days. We're recording here on November 6th, which is a very early stage of the NBA season. It's a long, long season. As you became a more experienced professional athlete, how did you prepare yourself to be able to go out there and give your best effort through an 82-game regular season schedule with, you hope, playoffs after that? And, of course, you got to stay in shape all year round. But let's say if it's November the 6th, how are you feeling and what are you using to get yourself ready to – how do you get yourself ready for every game?
It's tough. You got to have good people around you. Obviously, you got to have good coaches and you got to have good teammates. And you got to have – the right attitude. What humbled me was in college, you run into maybe a handful of players that had the talent and ability that you had in high school and college. When you go to the NBA, you're going from playing against boys to men. The biggest thing for me personally was I was in awe when I finally went to the NBA to play against Magic Johnson, to play against Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, or Dr. J, or Kareem, who was my idol growing up. You have to transition really quickly from the standpoint, it's great to be a fan. You follow these guys, but when you step on the court, it's a job now. And you got to understand that you're no longer the most talented guy on the court. You can't run the fastest. You can't jump the highest. So it's a humbling experience when you're going against guys like that every night. But what it proved to me is how much harder I had to work. I thought I was working hard, which I've always been a hard worker in high school and college. But when you get to the NBA, you got to kick it up a notch. And I really, again, I'll go back to Rick Pitino. I'll give him a lot of credit from this standpoint. When he left to take the Kentucky job, after a couple of years of being there, he would always ask when I was playing with the New York Knicks and when I was playing with I guess he had left before I played with the Bullets, but he would always say this. Rex Chapman was around in the summertime playing for the Charlotte Hornets. Jamal Mashburn had just left UK playing for the Dallas Mavericks, and I was still playing for the Knicks. And he would always say, guys, I want you guys to come back in the summertime and play pickup ball against these guys and tell me who's doing good and playing good, because coaches weren't allowed to watch them play. Mm-hmm. So he opened up the weight room. We could work out with the strength and conditioning coach, and we would play pickup games against the UK players in the summertime. That's how I stayed in shape, and it was good for me because it was some talented young guys on those teams, that Pitino had, and it was good for conditioning. It was great to work with a strength and conditioning coach. I was probably in the best shape of my life, but you got to be committed to doing stuff like that. The biggest problem with a lot of NBA guys is when you have that type of money and lifestyle, it's a little bit easy to get fat and lazy and out of shape and just take it for granted. So again, having, people or culture around that you can tap into, I think really helped me out a whole lot. And as long as you got people around you like that, keep yourself in shape, eat right, get your proper rest. That's hard to do in New York City when you're 22 and 23 years old. But the NBA at that time was not full of one and done. So when I went into the NBA with the New York Knicks, my teammates were guys that had already played maybe 8 or 9 years in the NBA. So when I came in as a rookie, they helped me with how to eat the right diet, how not to hang out, on the road when you're traveling, how to eat, properly, to the places where I lived and stayed, to try to get out of Manhattan and get out in New Jersey or upstate New York to get away from the hustle, bustle, and the expensive lifestyle of living in downtown Manhattan. So everything that they helped me out with, being older guys that have family, that was great, for me, because even after 4 years of college, it was an opportunity for me to be around guys that had my best interests at heart. I can't imagine the one-and-done era now. You got so many young guys that are trying to lead young guys that are coming out after only 1 year of college.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about your international experience. You had 2 stints in the NBA, but in between you played in Spain, Italy, and Japan. Mm-hmm. And that's got to be, even though you were a professional athlete by that time and out of college for a few years, but that would have to be a learning and growing experience just doing that, wouldn't it?
The first experience, which was after I left the Knicks, was Barcelona, Spain. And what made that whole experience so great was the 1992 Olympics was in Barcelona, Spain. And it was the first time that the Americans in basketball sent the pro guys to represent the United States. So I was over there 8 months before all of that came together. So to see a lot of people from the NBA checking out sites and coming to different games and doing different things, that was an amazing experience and time to see all of that come together. But the most important thing, Barcelona, my goodness, right there in the Mediterranean, paella and any kind of seafood off of the Mediterranean, and traveling throughout Spain from Madrid to Valencia or the Mallorca or Palma, the islands right off the coast of Spain, between Spain and Morocco. Most beautiful country, food, people that I think I've ever seen. Absolutely unbelievable. Unfortunately, I ruptured my Achilles tendon towards the end of that season and had to set out the final few games. So when I did my rehabilitation, I came back and I played in Rome, Italy, the following year, and had a pretty good year, and then eventually made my way back to the NBA with the Washington Bullets. It's kind of funny to say Bullets now because it's more politically correct to say the Wizards.
They've been the Wizards
yeah,
for a little
but,
while.
but they were the Bullets when I
Right.
played for them in 94 and 95. And then my last year was overseas in Spain in 1997. And I mean Japan in 1997. And love Italy, love Spain, the culture of both of those countries. I love Japan except for that was kind of tough for me culturally from the standpoint. Don't get me wrong, I like sushi, I like rice, and I like all of that stuff. But I love European type of food. The Oriental food was kind of a little tough to get used to initially. And just being outside of Tokyo kind of really helped. I guess Kawasaki was the city that I lived in. But I enjoyed that experience. I won a championship. It was on my only championship that I won in terms of international basketball. Japan basketball was kind of on the rise at that time. I think since then China has kind of moved a little farther ahead of them as far as basketball. But I appreciate all of the experiences, Keith. I mean, initially you want to live your dream of playing in the NBA, which I did. And I'm just amazed that I got a chance to travel the world and live in these different countries. And I love the United States. I love some of those other countries, but living there makes you appreciate just how good you got it here in this country and the freedoms that you have. But when I look at it now, I'm going, man, I can't really, because of basketball, I had an opportunity literally to travel the world.
Well, let me ask you one final question then, since we are at the beginning of basketball season and we're going into a new era of UK basketball. You talked a little bit about Mark Pope. What do you think this group is capable of as we sit here on November the 6th with much, much basketball yet to be played?
Well, I've watched the exhibition games, and what I really like about this team, and I've met a few of the guys, obviously a lot of experience on this team. I think so far they've kind of overachieved and kind of raised the bar because they have played so well together. But that's a compliment to Mark. You know, he got all of these guys in town as soon as he could. Coach Calipari took half of the recruits and half of the team down with him in Arkansas. And, look, I'm not upset about that. Coach Cal's got to do what he's got to do. But in a short period of time, Mark was able to identify guys that fit his system. He's going to shoot a lot of threes. It's going to be kind of like Pitino all over again. They're going to get up on a lot of threes, and we got a lot of really good shooters. So far, they've been making them. And obviously when they play against better competition, they got to continue to do that. So I'm okay with the offense. We've been accustomed to the dribble drive offense the last 15 years. And if Calipari's got a big, long, athletic team and athletic guards, the dribble drive offense is great. But the last 3 or 4 years, we haven't had those kind of players, so it hasn't looked the way that it did when Cal first got here. The big difference with Mark Pope's offense, guys are setting picks, they're running plays, they're running back cuts, the ball is moving and popping around, and these kids are not talking about who's going to be the next NBA player. They working together and trying to win a championship for UK, and they're playing for each other. It's almost like the old school way, like a family type of atmosphere. They all want to see each other be successful. And if they're all successful and if they go deep into the tournament, the NBA thing will take care of itself. So it's going to be a different approach. The old saying, there's different ways, I guess, of skinning a cat, and Calipari had his way, and I think Mark is going to put his spin on it. I think they're going to overachieve in this first year. They're ranked 23 in the country, and everybody's worried, including myself, because You got 8 SEC teams that are ranked ahead of them. So the non-conference is going to be tough. The SEC is going to be tough. But if he can just somehow, some way, get to the NCAA tournament and win 2 games, that's more than what we've won in the last 4 or 5 years, and that will be a good starting point.
And certainly a lot of excitement surrounding it. Kenny, really enjoyed talking with you, and thanks for sharing all these experiences. We enjoyed watching you play during your UK years, and, of course, you had a fine NBA career as well, and have maintained a residence here in Lexington, been part of the community, and it's just been nice to look back on those years and share that with you. So thanks a lot.
Appreciate it, buddy. Thank you.
You've been listening to the WUKY Sports Page with your host, Keith Elkins, an exclusive podcast from 91.3 WUKY, produced at the WUKY studios by Alan Lytle. Our theme music is Peanut Butter and Jam by Illogical Bit, available at soundcloud.com/illogicalbit. Subscribe to the Sports Page through iTunes, Google Play, or at our website, WUKY.org.